Hello. Today we'll discuss U.S. sugar market, its main demand and supply drivers. I begin with an overview of sugar production in the United States and its main producers, consumers, exporters, and importers in the world. Sugar is made from sugarcane or sugar beets and is used as a sweetener in food and drinks in the industrial processes. United States have both large and well-developed sugarcane and sugar beet industries. Sugar production has been growing over time, about 1.1% from 1969 to 2021. During this period, sugarcane accounted for about 46% of total sugar produced domestically, and sugar beets for about 54% of production. Sugar marketing year corresponds to U.S. government fiscal year, October 1st through September 30th. During 2018-2022, global sugar production has been around 182 million metric tons. In 2021-2022, 7 countries produced 68% of world sugar. They are Brazil, India, European Union, Thailand, China, United States, and Pakistan. During the same period, 7 countries accounted for 55% of the world's sugar consumption. These include India, European Union, China, United States, Brazil, Indonesia, and Russia. In 2021-22, India was the largest producer and consumer of sugar in the world. The largest exporter of sugar is Brazil, followed by Thailand and India. The largest importers of sugar are Indonesia, China, and United States. We will now discuss U.S. sugar market in more detail, beginning with sugarcane and sugar beet production. Sugarcane is a grass that grows in tropical climates. It's perennial, so there is no need to replant it every year. When sugarcane is harvested, it's cut just above the root level, so new sprouts will grow, ready to be harvested again in 10 to 12 months. In the United States, 3 states grow sugarcane. Florida is the largest producer, followed by Louisiana. There is a small amount that is grown in Texas. Sugar beet is a root crop that grows well in temperate climates. It is planted in the spring and harvested in the fall. As of 2020-21, in the United States, sugar beets were grown in 11 states: California, Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. Minnesota, Idaho, and North Dakota are the largest sugar beet producing states, comprising about 70%. How is sugar made from sugarcane and sugar beet? Learning about the differences in the process helps in understanding sugar prices. Sugarcane and sugar beets are harvested and transported to a sugar mill, where they're washed, cut into shreds for cane, and cassettes for beets. Using water and purifying agents, sugar juice is extracted from the sugarcane and sugar beets. The sugar juice is then boiled to make a thick sugar syrup. Sugar crystals are added to the syrup to assist in crystallization. Next, sugar syrup is spun in a centrifugal machine to separate sugar crystals from the liquid. This is the final step in the sugar beet processing step, which results in the creation of white granulated sugar. For cane sugar, the result is raw sugar, also known as turbinado or unrefined sugar. It has large, light brown sugar crystals due to a small amount of molasses still present. Raw cane sugar needs to be further refined into granulated white sugar or other types of sugar. Throughout the sugar-making process, several byproducts are made, which are used as fertilizer or animal feed such as beet pulp, cane pulp, molasses. Majority of sugar produced is used in food, bakery items, ice cream, and beverages. Sugar can also be used to make ethanol, which is a common practice in Brazil. However, in the US, nearly all fuel ethanol is made from corn. Next, I discuss different sugar prices used in the industry. There are 3 primary U.S. sugar prices: raw cane, also known as sugar contract number 16, wholesale refined cane, and wholesale refined beet. In addition, there is a distinction between wholesale and retail sugar prices. Wholesale price is what major food and beverage producers pay, and retail is the price that consumers pay in the grocery store. Figure shows free sugar prices for the period 1961 to 2021. The raw cane is cheaper than refined beet because of an additional processing step required to convert raw sugar into granulated sugar. Three distinct periods are observed in raw cane and wholesale refined beet prices. From 1961 to 1973, both prices are in the 10-cent per pound range. From 1982 to 2007, both prices are in the 20 to 30-cent range. And after that, both prices increase. Retail price is higher because of additional packaging and transportation costs. USDA provides refined cane sugar prices starting in 2000. Figure shows that U.S. raw and refined cane prices follow a similar trend, though the price spikes are more pronounced in the refined price. Following equation can be used to relate raw and refined cane prices. Refined cane price equals raw cane price divided by 0.93 plus processing cost plus packaging plus freight. 0.93 means there is a 7% yield loss. Yield loss is how much raw sugar weight is lost while processing it into refined. Processing costs include materials and labor. Packaging costs vary by the size of a package. Is it a 1,000-pound tote or a 50-pound bag? Smaller the packaging, higher the cost. Freight is how you ship the sugar. Is it rail or truck? World raw and refined sugar prices are consistently below U.S. prices. The primary reason for higher U.S. sugar prices is the strong government agricultural support program that limits the amount of sugar imports into U.S. and sets a price floor for both raw and refined sugars. When trying to estimate how the prices of sugar will behave, one needs to analyze the factors that affect its demand and supply. From Economics 101, we remember that a market price is determined by an intersection of demand and supply curves. The price can change when demand or supply curves move in or out. The components of sugar supply are beginning stocks, production, and imports. Beginning stocks are what is carried over from the previous year. Production is determined by the amount of acreage harvested and the yield per acre. U.S. imports a lot of sugar. In 2020-21 marketing year, U.S. imported 23% of its total U.S. supply. As will be discussed later, U.S. has an extremely regulated sugar market with import quotas and price floors. Demand for sugar comes primarily in domestic use to make food and beverages. Exports are almost non-existent, but there are ending stocks. Table summarizes the main demand and supply effects on sugar prices. On the demand side, we have population growth and consumer preferences, and price of sugar substitutes. On the supply side, we have technological changes that improve yields, adverse weather effects on yields, and government quota and price support programs. I describe each in detail next. Americans eat more now than they did in 1970. Table on the right compares per capita food availability in 1970, 2000, and 2018. The data is calculated by dividing the total annual supply of a commodity by the U.S. population for that year. Although these estimates do not directly measure actual quantities ingested, they provide an indication of whether Americans on average are consuming more or less of various foods over time. In 2000, Americans ate more of all foods, not just sugar and meat, but also fruit and vegetables. In 2018, food trends have changed. Consumption of sweeteners, grains, fruit, and vegetables decreased from 2000 levels, but increased for dairy, nuts, meat, and fish. Still, when compared to 1970, food use was high in 2018 in every food category. The first demand factor I will talk about is population growth and consumer preferences. Total amount of refined sugar delivered to the manufacturers of food and beverages has increased over time. Figure on the right shows total amount of sugar available to be used in food and beverages from 1960 to 2021. It increased between 1960 and 1970 and then declined between 1970 and mid-1980s, which was due to the increased use of lower price substitute, high fructose corn syrup. Sugar use has been increasing since mid-1980s. Population growth is the primary driver for the increased demand for sugar. However, availability of sugar per capita reached its peak in 1972 at 102.3 pounds and then declined to 60 pounds in 1986. It has stayed flat since then until mid-2000s. After that, sugar use started to rise again slowly. One factor responsible for this increase is decline in the use of high fructose corn syrup because of higher corn prices and perceived health benefits of using real sugar versus other sugar alternatives. Another factor that affects sugar demand is price of substitutes. Graph on the left shows availability of all sweeteners per capita during 1967 to 2019. Sweeteners include refined sugar from sugar beets and sugarcane, corn sweeteners, mainly high fructose corn syrup, honey and edible syrups such as maple syrup. Availability of total sweeteners increased continuously until 1999 when it reached its peak of 151.5 pounds per person. It was on the decline since then, driven by increased awareness of sugar and caloric intake by the consumers, and growth in diet food and beverage products that use sugar-free formulas to decrease calories. Graph shows how refined sugar per capita availability decreased, while high fructose corn syrup increased, reaching its peak in 1999. High fructose corn syrup is the primary substitute for refined sugar, which went into commercial use in 1967. High fructose corn syrup reached its peak of 63.8 pounds per capita in 1999. During the same time, refined sugar use declined drastically as manufacturers substituted sugar with high fructose corn syrup to cut costs. Up until 2005, high fructose corn syrup has been much cheaper than the refined sugar, about half the price. Graph on the right compares prices per pound for the period 1995 to 2021. For example, in 1999, high fructose corn syrup cost about 11 cents per pound, as compared to refined beet sugar of about 27 cents per pound, which is almost 2.5 times more expensive. High fructose corn syrup costs started to increase after 2005 because of increased use of corn to make ethanol to meet renewable energy standards. As corn became more expensive, demand for high fructose corn syrup has decreased. Other factors that led to a decline in high fructose corn syrup have been mentioned earlier. Their use of sugar-free alternatives to cut calories and perceived health benefit of using real sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup. We're moving on to the supply side. We begin by looking at the technological changes to improve yields. Sugar beet area harvested in 2021 was about the same as it was 40 years ago. However, yield per acre has increased from 19.7 in 1980-81 to 29.4 in 2021, or by 49%. The main driver behind the higher yields is adoption of genetically engineered herbicide-tolerant sugar beet seeds. Weeds reduce crop yields. Similarly to corn and soy, commercialization of GEHD sugar beet seeds in 2008 helped farmers with weed management and led to higher yields. GEHD sugar beet seeds got adopted very quickly. Acreage planted with GE sugar beets was 60% in 2008, 95% in 2009, 98% in 2013, and 100% by 2016. There is no GE sugarcane commercially grown in the U.S. Is there a premium for non-GMO sugar? Graph on the right compares the prices between wholesale refined cane, non-GMO, and beet, GMO sugar after 2008, a year GE sugar beets went into commercialization in the U.S. The price premium for non-GMO refined cane sugar was negligible until 2016, less than 1 cent per pound. In 2016, the premium increased to 5.45 cents per pound, driven by increased demand for non-GMO sugar due to Vermont's G labeling legislation and manufacturers' choice to use non-GMO sugar to meet customer demand and Vermont's mandatory labeling requirements. Vermont's Act 120, passed in May 2014, and Consumer Protection Rule 121, passed in April 2015, required all food produced with genetic engineering and offered for retail sale in Vermont to be properly labeled by July 1, 2016. It was the first state to have a mandatory GE labeling. However, the federal law National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Standard, passed in July 2016, nullified Vermont's GE labeling laws. Carter and Schaefer found that Vermont's mandatory labeling law was a driver for the divergence of cane and beet sugar prices. They estimated that GE mandatory labeling led to the price discount of 13% for beet sugar and the price premium of 1% for cane sugar, relative to what the prices would have been in the absence of the legislation. Pazuniak also found that there was a 5-cent per ounce price premium for non-GMO goods relative to GMO goods. Many manufacturers have been switching to using more non-GMO ingredients. In 2016, shunning of beet sugar was on the display everywhere. Big companies like Danone and Hershey's made a pledge for use of more cane sugar. Fast forward to today, and they delivered on their promise, to a degree. For example, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, Vermont's local, uses all plant-based non-GMO ingredients, which includes sugar. Hershey's has moved to making and labeling its products that use only non-GMO ingredients. Danone merged with the White Wave Foods Company, a large collection of organic and health food brands. What do consumers think of GMO versus non-GMO sugar? Evidence is mixed. For example, Lewis found that consumers were willing to pay more for non-GMO sugar and soft drinks that contain sugar. Whereas in the survey of consumer preferences from 2019, only 23% of respondents indicated they would be willing to pay an extra 50 cents for a $5 good that was labeled non-GMO. Despite higher sugar beet yields from GE technology, adverse weather still plays a role. For example, in 2011, beet sugar yields dropped by 14%, from 27.7 to 23.8 short tons per acre, due to wet field conditions that damaged the crops and leading to lower sugar beet production and subsequently raising sugar price. Hurricanes pose a threat to cane sugar production in Louisiana and Florida. For example, in 2005, Hurricanes Katrina and Rita were responsible for lower cane sugar production in Louisiana, and Hurricane Wilma for lower cane production in Florida. In addition, excessive rains in Louisiana in 2004 as a result of Tropical Storm Matthew caused lower cane sugar yields. The last supply factor I will review is the vast government sugar support policies. The first policy is the price support. Sugar processors can take loans for a maximum term of 9 months. Because the loans are made directly to processors and not sugar producers, to qualify for loans, processors must agree to provide payments to producers that are proportional to the value of the loan received by the processor. USDA has the authority to establish minimum producer payment amounts. The loans are non-recourse, and USDA must accept sugar pledged as a collateral as payment in full in lieu of cash repayment of the loan, at the discretion of the processor. Graph on the right shows national average sugar loan rates for raw cane and refined beet sugar. we can see that loan rates are generally well below the market prices. Second policy is Flexible Marketing Allotments Program, which limits domestic sugar supplies. Overall allotment quantity in a year is set at 85% of estimated domestic human sugar consumption. The OAQ is divided between refined beet sugar, about 54%, and raw cane sugar, about 45%. Individual allocations among cane and beet sugar processes are based on historical production. If some of the processes cannot meet their allocation, it is then reassigned to other processes of the same sugar type. If current year processes cannot meet OAQ, the deficit can be replenished with sugar from Commodity Credit Corporation inventories. If that fails, then the deficit is assigned to imports. There is no reassignment of allocations between beet and cane. So cane deficit cannot be met with beet sugar. The third policy is Sugar Tariff Rate Quotas Program, which sets a quota on how much sugar can be imported into U.S. duty-free or at a low tariff. Any amount of sugar above TRQ can be imported in unlimited quantities, but at a much higher tariff. Prior to the start of the fiscal year, October 1st through September 30th, the Secretary of Agriculture announces the quantity of sugar that may be imported at the preferential in-quota tariff rate during the fiscal year. The TRQ can be increased during the fiscal year if U.S. government deems it is necessary to meet the local demand. The Office of U.S. Trade Representative is responsible for allocating sugar TRQ to about 40 countries based on the representative period 1975 through 1981, when trade was relatively unrestricted. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection, through the Office of Trade's Quota Branch, implements the sugar quotas. TRQs are established in multilateral and bilateral trade agreements between U.S. and other countries. Let's delve into multilateral agreements. Under World Trade Organization TRQs, U.S. is required to import at the minimum 1,117,195 metric tons of raw sugar and 22,000 metric tons of refined sugar. The largest importers of raw sugar under WTO TRQs in fiscal year 2023 are Dominican Republic, Brazil, Philippines, Australia, and Guatemala. Now we switch to bilateral agreements. U.S. has negotiated various free trade agreements that include sugar TRQs. The most important ones are with Canada and Mexico, governed by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, previously known as NAFTA. Mexico has a big influence on U.S. sugar market. Prior to 2008, Mexico exported a very small amount of sugar into U.S. Between 2008 and 2013, Mexico imported sugar without any duties or quotas, which led to a dramatic increase of Mexican sugar imports at much lower prices. Mexico imports accounted for 66% of total sugar imports in 2013. In 2014, after the U.S. International Trade Commission determined that sugar imported from Mexico injured the domestic sugar, a new round of quotas and minimum prices were set on Mexican imports. 28 cents per pound for refined sugar and 23 cents per pound for raw sugar. Share of Mexican sugar imports dropped from a high of 66% in 2014 to 30% in 2021. Canada, under WTO TRQs, can import up to 10,300 metric tons of refined beet sugar and 59,250 metric tons of sugar-containing products, which includes refined cane. In addition, FTA TRQ is 9,600 metric tons for refined beet sugar and 9,600 metric tons for sugar-containing products. If USDA announces an increase in the U.S. WTO refined sugar TRQ, Canada will be granted an additional allocation equal to 20% of such increase, which may be made from raw sugar not of Canadian origin. Canada does not grow cane sugar. It imports it. U.S. has FTA with other countries, conditional on a trading country having a sugar trade surplus. Country's FTA TRQ is the lesser of the trade surplus of the negotiated quantity for that year. The largest partners with negotiated FTA TRQs are the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Panama, and Peru. The fourth policy is Feedstock Flexibility Program, which is designed to divert sugar in excess of domestic food consumption requirements to ethanol production. Fifth policy is disposition of sugar owned by the CCC program that transfers sugar from CCC inventories to the processors in exchange for reductions in production for reduced sugar crop planting. And finally, the sixth policy is sugar re-export programs. USDA administers re-export programs to help U.S. sugar refiners and producers of goods that use sugar to be competitive in the world market. For example, a refiner can export domestically produced refined sugar and later import low-duty raw cane sugar, or import raw sugar, refine it, and export it into the world market. A U.S. manufacturer of goods that use sugar can buy sugar from any licensed refiner at the world prices for use in the products to be exported to the world market. A common relationship used to analyze how the commodity's equilibrium price changes in response to supply and demand is by looking at the price and stocks-to-use ratio. Stocks-to-use ratio is calculated by dividing the ending stocks by total use. Total sugar use is the sum of sugar used in food and beverage, exported, and other. Ending stocks is defined as what is left from total sugar supply for the year after subtracting total sugar use. Changes in ending stocks are inversely related to price. If total use rises relative to supply, ending stocks decline and price increases, and vice versa. Graph on the right presents a scatter plot of annual wholesale refined beet price versus stocks-to-use ratio. I use beet price because wholesale refined cane and wholesale refined beet have a correlation coefficient of 0.98. Stocks-to-use ratio is fall sugar, beet and cane. And scatter plot only allows for two series. As expected, lower stocks-to-use ratios are associated with higher prices, whereas increasing stocks-to-use ratio leads to lower prices. I would like to conclude by presenting Brazil's sugarcane industry highlights. Brazil is one of the top 2 sugar producers and is the largest sugar exporter in the world. Brazil grows GE sugarcane. It approved commercial use of GE sugarcane in 2017. In 2022-23, Brazil is forecast to plant 70,000 hectares of GE sugarcane, which is only about 1% of all planted sugarcane. Unlike US, who uses corn, Brazil uses sugarcane to make ethanol. Ratio of sugar to ethanol produced from sugarcane in 2021-22 was 45% to 55%. Brazil has flexibility to switch sugarcane production from sugar to ethanol and vice versa quickly. High world sugar prices would encourage production of more sugar and less ethanol, whereas high ethanol prices would encourage production of more ethanol and less sugar. Brazil and US account for 84% of global ethanol production. Even though ethanol use produces less emissions, it has other adverse environmental consequences, including deforestation and water pollution. Thank you for listening and hope you watch my other commodities basics videos.